Welcome back to the Warrior Servant Leader podcast. We're so glad you're joining us today. We have an awesome guest, uh, Grant Harris, a globally recognized neuroinclusive performance strategist and speaker who shifts organizations from friction to flow by fixing their process, not their people, so they can save time, keep talent, and deliver value by redesigning how work gets done at scale. Grant's work actually starts with the simple truth. Most performance challenges aren't people problems, they're process problems. And through a human centered performance lens, Grant shows how everyday systems, meetings, roles, decision making, and even expectations either enable execution or quietly undermine it. Now, Grant is a late diagnosed autistic person, author, introvert, and certified diversity executive. And he brings both lived experience and enterprise level rigor to his work with his clients. And he translates complex ideas about human cognition into clear execution ready insights that leaders can apply immediately without turning the conversation into an advocacy. Boy, I'm tongue tied this morning, or awareness training. Grant, and we're going to have a great conversation. I really want to dive into your journey and what life before your diagnosis is like, and life after, and how you're applying all that in the corporate world and in people's personal and professional lives. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Pat. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
And this is going to be fun. And I think very enlightening. It's a lot of times people are uncomfortable when they are put in an environment with neurodiverse individuals and they don't know what to do or say or how to interact with folks. Your life before diagnosis, what was it like being neurodiverse and not yet knowing it?
I was just being me. I didn't know any different. I did not grow up around disability or neurodivergence. I don't recall any of my friends, any of my schoolmates being autistic or otherwise that I knew. None of that was a thing. And my dog just popped in. Don't mind her. So it was new to me, and I was living life, and the problems that I had, the communication friction, the structure, being quote unquote rigid to other people. All of that was frustrating, but I didn't apply that to being autistic. I just applied that to that's who I am, that's how I operate, and other people would have to meet me halfway and I have to meet them, but I didn't apply it to being neurodivergent in any way. So I just thought it was me. Other people will tell you they have some choice words. Rude is one. Conceited is another. Aloof, loner. These types of words people would use to describe me on the negative end. People have positive things to say about me because I'm a great guy. But on the negative end, those were things that frustrated people. Me being an autistic introvert, and I knew about being an introvert much earlier in my life than I knew about being autistic. And I've only leaned in to talking about being introverted within the last 6 months or so. But I've been talking about being autistic for the last few years. So that's an interesting dichotomy and how they play off of each other. So yeah, I didn't know that. I wasn't walking around internally, yeah, I'm autistic and these other people just don't know. Like, no, I was living my life, doing the things that I do, being comfortable in the way that I was. and experiencing that friction until I got a diagnosis and I was brought to a new foundation of who I am.
Wow. So kind of two questions, and we've lost your video.
Yeah.
There we go. So two questions. One, how old were you when you got the diagnosis, and what was the, so really three questions. How old were you? What was the impetus, the incentive to get a diagnosis? And then if I can ask you and you want to share it, what is your diagnosis? Because there's so many things on the spectrum. I mean, there's over 100 different kinds of diagnoses you can get, and communication is so key to where you're at, so that other people can communicate. So how
great
old
question.
were you?
So a little bit of technical and a little bit of practical answer. I was 38, and most autistic people are diagnosed by the age of 6. So I lived most of my life, majority of my life, not being fully aware of who I am or how I showed up in those ways, and how my traits and the way that I display them and how my brain operates interacted with other people. So I was 38. I was married. I was a homeowner. I had multiple kids. I had multiple jobs. I had 401ks and retirement accounts and all of these things and the accoutrements that come with being an adult. But internally, I still didn't know. I had taught autistic kids as a special educator, which probably helped me connect with those kids on a level that I was unaware. So, and I taught other children with disabilities as well. So I believe that all of that prepared me for that transition in my life. And I can go back and look at those times and say, oh yeah, I see this, I see that. But I was 38. My diagnosis, I am extremely privileged for many reasons, because I was able to afford in time and money a diagnosis. Many people can't, especially people who look like me. Black and brown people can't. So there is a vast discrepancy in this country. This conversation isn't about healthcare, but access to healthcare is important. And I was blessed to have a referral from a qualified psychologist to another qualified psychologist. I was blessed to live within driving distance, less than an hour. I was blessed to be able to have the time to do that because I was working from home. I had the opportunity, because it's a multi-step process. You don't go in the door and walk out the door with a diagnosis. You have to go back multiple times. So for those who are unaware of that process, for those who don't know or are seeking, that's what it is. And fortunately, I had that access, and I was able to pay for it. It wasn't cheap. I'm not retiring early, so to speak, but I was able to pay for that diagnosis, and many people can't. So that was the process. And I had been in the education system. I had taught autistic kids. I was aware of some of these things when a lot of people aren't, and it just hits them like a ton of bricks. So I was in a different position, and I'm fully aware, Pat, of my privilege when it comes to that in terms of my journey. The answer to your third question is what is my diagnosis? My diagnosis is I am diagnosed autistic. And for those of your listeners who are unfamiliar, a little bit of history of a certain generation. It was at one time called Asperger's. You may be familiar with that term, Pat. And the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Medical Statistical Bible, that has all of these different types of medical diagnoses in it, including the ones having to do with neurodivergence, has evolved. And it evolved to do away with Asperger's and move to a more global diagnosis of autism. And they have levels of autism in the DSM-5, because that is how the medical field from a medical perspective, and I'll talk about the difference between different types of approaches to this conversation. But the medical approach is to quantify and to put in 3 different levels in autistic diagnosis: level 1, 2,
Mhm.
3.
Mhm.
I am a level 1, which, excuse me, you and your listeners may have been familiar with the term high functioning,
Right.
which
Right.
really we don't use that term, or I don't subscribe to that term. Because inherently, Pat, if something or someone is high, then something or someone else has to be low. And just because of the way that my autism displays and shows up for me doesn't discount or disrespect another person's autism and the way it shows up for them, because no two autistic people are alike.
Right.
So, but from a medical perspective, people would say high functioning because I can have this conversation with you, because I'm articulate, because I do all these things that don't make me look autistic, but that's because autism and neurodivergence and disability as a whole, from an ableist perspective, they have all of these ideas about what it's supposed to look like. And autism to most people on the street, Pat, is a adolescent white boy that keeps to himself and is in the corner of the room, and he's lining up trains and he's lining up dinosaurs all day, and that's it. That's what they think it is.
Yeah.
And that ain't
No, yeah, I get
So-
it. So are you would you'd be considered like twice exceptional? It would be a term. Are you familiar with that one as far as?
So I am familiar with the term, and I have colleagues that are experts in this area. They have PhDs and PsyDs in this area. I am not an expert of twice exceptional. I don't see myself as exceptional. I have done exceptional things in my life, but I do not label myself or call myself twice exceptional. That's in the gifted lane, as far as I am aware, as far as I know.
Right.
But again, I don't move in that lane. I have colleagues that do and could talk at that ad nauseum, but that's not my lane.
Okay, and my age group, I'm in my late 60s, is and we had 5 kids. In hindsight, several of my kids were in the gifted and talented programs at school, and they excelled in that arena, and they're adults. They're in their 40s now. That in today's and I'm very familiar with the moving from Asperger's into the autism spectrum. Probably a couple of our kids would test or be diagnosed on that scale because of things we now recognize that yes, they were exceptional in one area, but for example, and I don't know if this is you, have you, I'm completely going off track right here for a second.
Oh, good. That's a conversation.
Have you seen the documentary on Temple Grandin? That she's the professor.
I am familiar with Temple. I've seen her work. I've seen the documentaries. As a matter of fact, I'm scheduled to be on a podcast with her in the coming months. So yes, very familiar with Temple.
Yeah, and that whole Asperger's neurodivergency, like for her, she sees words in pictures, and just and it's fascinating. I teach law enforcement on how to interact with folks with disabilities, whether it's intellectual or developmental. And everybody, I liked how you said, everybody, unless they're in a coma, has a means of communicating with other people. Because you'll hear a lot of people go, oh, well, they're nonverbal. Well, they're only nonverbal in the sense that they don't speak a language like you and I might, but they can communicate their feelings and their wants and their needs and all that kind of stuff. where I'd like to kind of pivot is you now, post diagnosis, you're in that world of in the business world, the corporate world, of helping people solve what they think is people problems, when in reality, as you've identified, most of them are systems and process problems.
Yes.
How do we, because, and that, I just got to say this, 85% of all disabilities are invisible. So I had a TBI in second grade. I have tinnitus. I have vertigo issues. I have long-term memory issues. But if you looked at me and talked to me and looked at my career, you would never guess in 100 years that I have several ADA identified disabilities, but they don't interfere with any of my major life activities to a certain point. How do we, in this business world kind of scenario, there's a fine line between people thinking I'm the boss, I have to manage my people and tell them what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And then the flip side, you have from Dale Carnegie to John Maxwell and other folks going, everything rises and falls on leadership, and that's relationship driven. How do we merge those two in your world, in your experience in the corporate world, especially? How do we balance being the boss, but then also being a leader?
There's a lot to unpack in that question, Pat. So thank you for asking.
It's a loaded question. Yeah.
So first and foremost, let's start with the invisible disabilities and the ramifications there. So you are correct. The majority of disabilities and the majority of neurodivergence is non-apparent. You don't see it with your eyes. But the results of the friction that's caused in the workplace is definitely apparent. The levels of anxiety, the levels of loneliness, the levels of disengagement in the workplace, the levels of 80 to 85% of autistic people being under or unemployed. That's very visible. You can see burnout show up. You can see anxiety and depression. You can see these things, although you may not see the ignition, the igniter of those things. You see them over time. So while the upfront disability of neurodivergence may be unseen, the ramifications of friction in the workplace are seen 100% and felt 100% by those like you and I who have those unseen or quote unquote invisible disabilities. So that's the first point I want to make, because it does show up. And how does it show up for leadership? How does it show up for organizations? It shows up in lost time, lost productivity. It shows up in worse performance from their people. It shows up in bleeding value quarter to quarter for your stakeholders and your external stakeholders. That's how it shows up for organizations. And they can see that and they can feel that, and they feel that in their pockets. So there's a through line between what is unseen and what's invisible to what is seen and felt within the organization through the people because of the friction in the processes. That's number one. Number two, you talk about this dichotomy between boss, which is a societal title label that gets thrown on someone that happens to be in this hierarchy model above someone else, and someone else is beneath them. So therefore they're quote unquote the boss. Being a boss is very different than being a leader. Leadership does not show up in a hierarchy. True leadership does not. It shows up all around 365. It's comprehensive. The intern can be a leader while the CEO is just a boss. So leadership shows up in action. Leadership shows up in awareness. Leadership shows up in direction. In the workplace, what does that look like? It looks like workflows, decision making. Who's making decisions? Leaders make decisions every day. Bosses don't always make decisions. And how are those decisions being made? Are they being made in community with the people that they affect, or are they being made in silos? And if they're being made in silos and not with the people that they affect, those downstream effects lead to those negative aspects of anxiety, depression, burnout, etc. So role clarity is important, especially when you're talking about hierarchy in organizations. Do people know what they own? What does success look like? Where are the boundaries? What happens if I cross those boundaries? Who sets those boundaries and why? That's leadership. That's not being the boss or the manager. So the focus that I have in fix your process and not your people isn't that we have a boss who's over these people and the boss sits on high and says, well, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way I think. And then communicate in one streamlined journey. That's not how leadership works. Okay. So
Yeah.
clarity.
Yeah.
Clarity is the goal. Leaders start with clarity. Communication, design, measurement, rhythm, operating rhythm. These are leadership principles that no matter where you are in the organization and how you think, those are the things that rise to the top, not just the person who holds the label of boss.
Wow. So that kind of then begs the question, and I'm picturing what you're saying, having been in an organization. I had like 8 police chiefs in 26 years, and that silo, because you have bars, stars, and stripes, and cloverleafs, and all that kind of stuff, and that roller coaster ride of the change at that chief executive position creates a lot of chaos. And so I guess I think I always struggled with, and a lot of our listeners struggle with, is a lot of folks are visionaries. They're those 30,000 foot, can see the whole big picture, and they suck at execution. and then how do those folks? Well, first of all, how do we get the right person being the CEO? How do we get the right people in the right seats that have this, whether it's neurodiversity or whatever their gifts and talents are? How do we actually, step by step almost, get the right people in the right seats and break that cycle? Because obviously you can look at companies and organizations, just all over the place, that you're like, what the heck is that guy doing as being, the CFO or whatever it is, but we keep repeating the same mistakes. So how do we get the right people in the right seats so that the processes you're talking about work effectively and efficiently and aren't bottlenecked by a people problem? I don't know if that makes sense.
So it does. And in my work, Pat, I'm not here to decipher how a leader got to where that leader is. And I'm not there to disrespect the work that they've done in order to get there. What I am here to do is 2 things. One, wherever that leader is and wherever that leader sits, to help them understand and realize that they are in a position where they have the ability to be vulnerable, and that's okay. And vulnerability doesn't mean softness. Vulnerability doesn't mean weakness. Vulnerability means asking a question versus making a statement. Vulnerability shows up as asking a person how they see success versus dictating what success is to them. Vulnerability also shows up as saying, I may be a leader of neurodivergent people, But 15 to 20% of the world's population is classified as neurodivergent. And those are only people that we know about. In my opinion, I think you can double that. Easily, half the world is probably neurodivergent, which means if you are a leader, you may be neurodivergent yourself. So that vulnerability of looking inward and having that self-reflection, not just, oh, Pat, he thinks different. How do I work with him? And say, oh, Pat thinks different. Well, if Pat thinks different, maybe I do too. So it starts there with a question, not with weakness, not with softness, but a question instead of a statement. But I'm not here to tell people that if they're in a seat and they've got stars, bars, and stripes. I went to military school. I understand discipline. I understand rank and authority. I understand chain of command, and I respect that. But in that chain of command, just because you have those bars, stars, and stripes, you have more responsibility to show up for your people, not less. Now, reverse that. What I do help organizations do is look at their onboarding processes, because onboarding is the first place where friction shows up. And how do we move a process like onboarding from friction to flow? And there's 4 steps in that process. First and foremost, you have to identify the friction. Where is the bottleneck? Look at repeatable places where the work is slowing down, stalling, repetitive, confusing, duplicative. Identify the friction in that step. This looks like misunderstandings, unclear ownership. Who owns this process? Who owns this task or responsibility? It looks like overload, cognitive overload. It looks like rework, doing the same thing over and over again and not getting a different result. So identify the friction, number 1. 2, test the source. Okay. Is this actually a Pat problem, or is the process and the system around Pat inhibiting his ability to get this job done? Usually what leaders do, if something is faulty, they say, Pat, you're the problem. I'm going to put you on a PIP. You're the problem. I'm going to be watching over your shoulder. You're the problem. I'm going to train you more. I'm going to coach you more. Not saying that training and coaching isn't valuable. It is. Training and coaching should not be punitive. It should be a springboard into the next level of a career. But instead, people get trained and they get coached because the leader says, oh, Pat is the problem. Instead of looking at the setup and the process around Pat to say, well, maybe we need to shift these things because they're causing friction for Pat to get the job done. So it's a core diagnostic where we're separating capability between capability and performance and clarity. Maybe you, Pat, don't understand what the outcome is. And if you don't understand the outcome, how are you going to get there? Maybe you understand the outcome, but you don't have the tools and resources in order to achieve that outcome from your seat. Maybe you understand the outcome, you don't have the tools, and you have the tools and the resources, but you don't have the access to the people that you need in order to get that job done. So all of those things don't really have anything to do with Pat or the person. They have everything to do with the process around Pat. Okay, that's number 2, test the source. So number 3 in this friction to flow process, okay, locate and redesign. So we're going to redesign a process. And redesigning a process should be at scale. Meaning if we just work with Pat in Pat's office and Pat is going through onboarding and we only redesign a process for that person, that's not at scale. Processes need to be scalable. So decision flow, workflow, handoffs. You talked about bottlenecks. Where's the handoff dropping? That's creating a bottleneck. I mentioned role clarity earlier. So for example, decision flow, how are decisions made? How are they delayed? Why are they delayed? How are they escalated? How are they communicated? When do they get revisited? These things, Pat, are processes. And if you get your thumb on the processes, then you begin to understand and realize that it's not necessarily the cogs in the system, the people in the system that are tripping and fumbling over themselves. They don't understand how a decision is supposed to be made. They don't know who they're supposed to go to. They don't know the escalation process. The escalation process is there, but it's confusing. They get escalated, but then they don't get clear communication and feedback. So these are the things that the friction to flow model alleviates. Last but not least, you target a little bit of a snowball effect. You target the smallest useful fix. What's the thing that's going to take the least amount of time, least amount of money, and the least amount of drag on resources in order to fix? Find that thing, you fix that thing. You redesign that thing. You put a timetable on it. Say we're going to do this for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You put a timetable on it. You measure it. And you say, okay, 30 days ago, we redesigned this process. Now, is this process working? Is it more effective? Is it getting the job done? Is it more efficient? Is it getting the job done with the least amount of drag on time, talent, and treasure? So you start with the smallest useful fix. Those are the four steps of moving from friction to flow.
And you know what I'm picturing? Everything you're describing, and it's in the workplace. And I'm following everything. And we probably have studied some of the same experts in this field. And literally, this is what I was picturing. Us raising 5 kids. Everything you're talking about is, there was 13 years difference between the oldest and the youngest, and the chaos in the household at different stages and different times of the year and all sorts of things. Everything you're saying that we should be applying in the workplace, we're actually doing that on a much smaller scale in our own personal lives. So there's something there that we can relate to, that what you're saying makes sense. That what you call onboarding, or as the children get older, it's like my wife would, because we had 5 kids, so and the 2 boys, they bunked together in one bedroom, but it was like Thursday is laundry day. And so, Wednesday evening, Mom would come in and there's clothes all. It looks like a cyclone went off in your room, and she would say, "Hey, tomorrow's laundry day. Clean up your rooms and so I can do laundry tomorrow." And she'd come in later that evening when the kids are all going to bed and their rooms are spotless. There's nothing on the floor, everything. And then she opens the closet door and it's one giant pile. And so that, that communication and expectation, the message delivered, clean up your room so I can do laundry tomorrow. That wasn't the message received. The message delivered, Mom's mad because my room's a mess. And how we do that in the workplace, which kind of takes me to the next question. Are our performance evaluation processes antiquated? I mean, do we need to change how we evaluate performance? And if we do, what's that look like in order for the processes you're talking about to be effective and efficient and productive?
So yes, and thank you for that. I have 2 girls and a boy, and the tornado in the room is always with the girls. I don't understand why. My sister's growing up is like that. My sister's but my son and me, orderly, but my wife and all the women in my life, their rooms look like a bomb and all. So I get that. So shorter answer is yes. So in my overall platform is human-centered performance. Human-centered performance. So there are stats out there of over 70% of workforce transformations in the workplace fail. Upwards of 80+% of AI transformations fail. And not because of AI itself. AI is not the villain in this story. The villain in this story is, like you said, the outdated, the outmoded, the traditional, the linear thinking and models, because that's not human centricity. That's not human performance. So there are ways, and I offer diagnostic assessments. And these diagnostic assessments, we measure 5 different metrics. And these 5 different metrics look at the multitude of things that have to do with the people in the workforce, and measures how human centric your workforce is. The more human centric your workplace or workforce is, the more effective and efficient it is. So it's measurable. We can see it. We can measure it. It's data based. Excuse me. It's not like a database, but it's data backed, research based, and tied to not only principles, not only theory, not only frameworks, but practical application in the workplace.
Mhm.
So this particular tool is called the Human Score, and it looks at 5 metrics: organizational structure, fairness, decision making. I said organizational structure, yes, organizational development, and one other. There are 5 metrics, and in these metrics, the difference between this particular diagnostic and assessment and other employee engagement surveys, like the Net Promoter Score or poll surveys that you find in the workplace, is that those standard and traditional ways tell you what the person or your workplace is thinking and feeling in that moment. It's a snapshot in time. Pat feels this way. Pat's either happy or sad or indifferent. What it doesn't tell you, and what the Human Score does tell you, is why Pat may be thinking or feeling that way. Number one, why is Pat feeling or thinking happy or sad? And 2, what to do next in order to change Pat's outcome or the organization's outcome, tied to all of that data and theory and frameworks and practicality that I mentioned. So it measures on these 5 metrics, snapshot in time, but not just a snapshot, but why or how people got there, and how we can move from where they are now to get to be closer to a human-centric workplace.
And my brain's spinning. Is that same application for existing employees? Can that be applied in a very effective way in recruiting employees, so that you're getting the right people at the right time and putting them in the right places, as opposed to, hey, we're going to source this out to Indeed.com, and we're going to we're going to look at resumes, and we're going to do our piles and all that, and we're antiquated even in the recruiting arena. How can we be more human centric in who we hire in the first place?
So funny you bring that up, Pat. I'm actually speaking at Disrupt HR. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that event, but it's a global event with focused on HR practitioners and speakers across the world in different cities get up on stage for 5 minutes, and they disrupt a particular topic within the HR orbit with 20 slides on a PowerPoint that advance every 15 seconds. That's the format across the globe.
Wow.
And I'm giving a little preview because you asked about recruiting. And there's a question that gets asked in interview process. What's your spirit animal? What's your spirit animal? And somewhere along the line, someone thought that that would be a reasonable way to evaluate human beings for employment. I don't know who, but someone thought that was going to be a reasonable question. And now somewhere out in the cloud, there's a spreadsheet full of spirit animals that have nothing to do with the capability of a person and whether or not they can do the job. So when you ask about recruiting and how do we hire right people, we have to start with a better process in the interview process. You have to start with a better branding. People, neurodivergent people that think differently need to see themselves in your branding, in your communication, so that when they are, one, that they're attracted, because that's the first part of recruiting is attraction. And then you need to ask different questions when in an interview, and not just moving away from what's your spirit animal, moving towards two things. One, less resumes, because resumes don't tell if Pat can get the job done. Resumes tells about Pat's history. It opens up bias, age bias. It opens up confirmation bias based on education, these things that people know. So doing away with resumes, moving towards portfolios of work. What's Pat's portfolio? Whatever the job is, what have you put together to show that you can do a thing? Even if that thing was unpaid, even if that thing was volunteer, even if it doesn't matter. It shows that you have the capability to do the thing. That's one. Two, moving towards skills-based assessment. Looking at Pat's skills. So put Pat in a position to do that thing in front of the decision makers at a given time, so that Pat can show up and employees can show up and say, this is the thing, I can do this thing. It's not just about telling you, it's about showing you that in the moment, I have this skill. So when you talk about recruitment, those three things: one, neurodivergent people being able to see themselves in an organization's branding, visually or otherwise. Two, doing away with or reducing the need for resumes. And three, leaning into and adopting policy around skills-based assessment and putting people in the position to show that they have the skills and the capability to do the job, versus moving off of HR systems that believe that they detect talent, but they really detect comfort. Yeah. That's the move to make.
Yeah, or they detect either the most amount or least amount of friction that may result from hiring somebody. And one of the things, I think, a couple of things that would be a challenge, I think, in the HR arena, in the hiring arena, particularly in the neurodiverse category, is many neurodiverse individuals think literally. They take everything literally. A friend of mine, her son is neurodiverse, and she and her husband were talking about an issue or a problem at the dinner table, and my friend says to her husband, "Boy, hey, there's more than one way to skin a cat." And her son Joe just went, almost into a full-blown meltdown. I mean, that because literally that's what he thought she was going to do. And so in the communication arena, identifying how to communicate with people who may have a neurodiverse diversity is important, not to penalize them. And I wrote a note down earlier, we shouldn't be training and accountability and mentoring and coaching should not be seen from a discipline, a performance improvement plan is discipline. The root of the word discipline, and I don't know Latin, but I can't speak it, but the root of the word discipline is disciple. And disciple, the etymology of that word is to train and learn, not punish. And we have gone from helping people learn from their mistakes to punishing them for their performance or lack of performance. That was one thing. From the recruiting standpoint, how do we get HR people? Because you get into the public service arena, everything is civil service. I mean, there's the same test for the process is boom, 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 by the book. We can't, diverge from it until we get to the oral review, if there's an interview process. But even then, you have to ask the same questions of every applicant, because that's the way we've always done it. How do we get folks to grasp that are in those positions of that recruiting and processing applicants to understand? This is the one thing I've come to understand. Everybody, no matter your neurodiversity or not, is we all want the same four things. We want security, we want safety, we want prosperity, and we want control in our lives. And how do we get our business mind and processes and systems to recognize we have to, it's about them, your employees, not about your bottom line or, keeping your job as the boss or the CEO. How do we incorporate that in a way that people can fundamentally see it? And I always come back to talking about families. We do this with our own families. If you have more than one child, you don't treat your children exactly the same way in all things, because you recognize their gifts and their talents and their challenges and their obstacles, and you will treat your children fairly, but you can treat them differently. How do we get that? How do we get that into the workplace, that mindset? Because we have it in our homes, but we don't have it in our workplaces. We come to work and, business is business, and we get very rigid, and we lose empathy, we lose compassion, we lose common sense, I think, in some situations. How do we get people to come to that aha realization?
Couple of things. One, I want to go back to your point about communication. I actually had I joined a webinar with Disability In a few weeks back, and my take or my angle on that particular conversation, which was about innovation in the workplace and how we use neurodivergent talent to innovate. And communication, like you mentioned, I talk about the 3 C's: clear, concise, and consistent. So clarity is king and queen. So when you talk about taking things literally, being clear, meaning say what you mean and mean what you say, that old adage. But remove the corporate jargon, remove the fluff, remove the extra, and say exactly what you mean to achieve the desired outcome. Clarity. Concise. Do it in less words. So use 3 words instead of 5. Use 5 words instead of 7 in order to get the message across. Get the message across in as little time and as little words as possible in order for the message to be digested by as many people as possible. It's number 2. Number 3, consistent. So communication from a leader, one-to-one, and communication from a leader organizationally should be consistent. Meaning, if you show up and you're an email person, okay, 80% of your communication should be via email. Not email one day, Slack the next day, phone call the third day, X the next day. All of that is cognitive chaos. So show up consistently in communication as a leader within the organization. People know that the majority of the time, this is the platform that they can hear you on or they can access you. And if it's not a platform, they understand that you are a one-to-one person, meaning you're going to have a one-to-one conversation. Or they understand that you're going to communicate and delegate. But that's the consistency that needs to be there from a communication standpoint, whether that's one-on-one, one-to-one, or one to many. So clear, concise, and consistent are the 3 C's that I talk about. There are 3 E's that follow that up: effective, efficient, and equitable. Effective. Does it do what it was intended to do? The communication. So my communication to you, Pat, my intention was for you to type 500 words in the next hour. Did you type those 500 words because you understood I was clear? I want 500 words in the next hour. That word could be I. I is a word, and you could type I 500 different times. Or you could write a story in those 500 words. What 500 words? So did it get the job done? Was it effective? Was it efficient? Did it get the job done in as little time, as little pressure and drag on time, talent, and treasure? So was it efficient? I got it done quickly, got it done cheaply, and it didn't take away from people resources. And lastly, is it equitable? Does the communication have the least amount of harm, least amount of danger to the people that stand the most amount of harm without detracting from anyone else? Okay. So the 3 C's and the 3 E's of communication. When you were talking about being literal with communication, that's where my mind went. So I wanted to share that with you and the audience.
Yeah, that's great. That's I use it exactly what you're talking about, and take it out of the corporate world, in the law enforcement world. I've actually seen a video of this. A neurodivergent driver, traffic stop, suspected DUI, and driving under the influence. And the officer has the driver out and is doing the finger to nose test and doing all different tests. And then it comes to walking a straight line. And it gives the driver the instructions. Imagine there's a line right there. I want you to walk heel to toe 9 steps and turn around and come back heel to toe 9 steps. Don't start till I tell you. Do you understand me? Yes. And I think that feedback, is one of the things that we often fail to do. Is we can be clear, concise, and whatnot. We think we are, but the recipient of the message, it's not the message received. And the officer tells the driver, "Okay, start." And the driver's just standing there looking at the ground. So the officer, non-compliant, can't understand instructions, did not complete the test. In an interview later, the lawyer, defense attorney, asked the client, "Why did you not do the heel to toe?" And the client, neurodiverse, goes, "I couldn't see the line he was talking about." He didn't understand the word invisible. He just understood, hey, there's a line in front of me. I'm supposed to walk the line. And so that you can be clear, concise, because I give you really definitive, imagine a line, walk it 9 steps, turn around, come back 9 steps, and then stop. Don't start till I tell you to. And I think I'm being clear, concise, and and we fail to get feedback or we demand, you understand what I'm saying, right? And we go, yes, as opposed to what do you think I expect of you right now? Like the 500 words. Do you have any questions about my instructions? And then give me the feedback. And in law enforcement, we would do that when we do search warrants. Everybody would have an assigned task, and then the briefing would be done. And then at the end of that briefing, whoever the case detective is, he calls on you by name. What are you going to do? And you have to tell me. So now we all know that you understand your assignment, and I know you understand. So that's, I think, and these are common sense things. We do it with, again. Yeah. Well, we do it with our kids. We do it in our families. This whole, because where we get in trouble, the equitable, the first thing I thought of, equitable. 13 years different in age of the kids, our workforces. We have multiple generations. And I would get it from the older kids. You're letting the little ones get away with murder. I wasn't allowed to, talk that way or do those things. And that it was that whole equity. You're treating me differently than you're treating them. And we have that same thing in the workforce when you have a 20-something versus a 40-something versus a 60-something. And we end up with this breakdown in communication, not because people are intentionally miscommunicating. I had officers that if you've been on the job 20 years and I tell you, hey, I need you to do this and I need it done by tomorrow and I need a report and recommendation back to me. And that would be the end of it. I have other officers, I could tell them that and then they wouldn't get it done. And it's like, dude, what's going on? Oh, well, I didn't understand exactly. But if I texted them with instructions, boom, they get it. So it's such a diverse workplace these days. And I love your ideas of the old KISS principle, keep it simple. And then the last, stupid, not a good word, but how that is a truth in we're overcomplicating things so much. We're so afraid of failing that we want to micromanage, and everything has to, and that whole everything has to be done identical to every person that we work with or work for, and we've taken away compassion and empathy and common sense. I thought I had.
They always like to tell my kids, common sense isn't so common.
Yeah, I think there was a book back in the 70s or 80s that was actually the title of the book, Why Common Sense Isn't So Common. If you had one takeaway for the audience, our listeners, whether it's in the workplace or in your community, community life, your family life, from this being neuro aware, what would that be? What would that advice be? So,
two points. One, since most of my work is within the workplace, the majority of workplaces are designed with and for one type of mind. And that's really the problem that I focus on. And I would leave them with fix your process and not your people. Fix the process and not the people. The second thing that I would leave, and this is a bit more on the global scale, is that when every brain thrives, we all do. When every brain thrives, we all do. And we all have the right inherently as humans, distinctly as humans, to thrive. And if organizations focus more on fixing their processes that affect the people within them, then more people are able to thrive, and then everyone does. So fix your people, not your process. And when every brain thrives, we all do.
Awesome, man. Grant, this is a great conversation because it's the kinds of conversation we should be having in our workplaces to begin with, and not being one of the things Chris Voss and Robin Dreek both came out of the FBI, one a hostage negotiator, the other counterintelligence phenom, is that we need to check our egos at the door. Understand it's not about us. It's about those that we're serving and working with and leading, and be non-judgmental and always try to give something positive back to the people you're interacting with. And if you do that, then you're taking what you would call those biases out of the equation, because we fundamentally start with, it's not about me. It's always about other people. So, man, I love having this conversation with you. And good luck on, you said you're going to be on a show with Temple Grandin. I would love to hear your feedback on that. So maybe we'll get you back on the show and talk about some of your unique experiences in interacting with folks with intellectual or developmental disabilities. For our audience, man, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's because of you, we're now in 67 countries on 6 continents, and that community of warriors, servants, and leaders with that mindset is growing, all because of you. So thank you for being a part of our lives and sharing our vision and mission with your friends and family. I close every episode with, but man, before I close, I almost did a big faux pas here. Grant, how do people reach out to you, man? It's like, I'm so excited talking to you that I'm not even following my own show notes of, hey, you're supposed to ask. So how can people reach out to you? They want to learn more, or they want to bring you in. They got an organization that is out of balance.
Yeah. So my website, compliance2community.com, all words, compliance2community.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at GT Harris 555, GT Harris 555. And if you DM me process, I will send you a one-pager and a surprise bonus. So I'll give you all this information in the show notes, Pat. But if your audience DMs me process at GT Harris 555, then I will reply with a special bonus for your listeners. I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Grant, thank you so much, man. And to our audience, I close every episode with the same encouraging advice. Always, always, always strive to do the do every day, every time. Love you all, and see you next week.